Well, let's bring Ryan Turner on screen now. Ryan is the new music director for the Newburyport Choral Society, which is now in its 85th year. And he's in his 10th season as the artistic director of Emmanuel Music in Boston, where he's conducted over 170 Bach cantatas and the complete masterworks of Bach. He has also been an opera conductor. He's appeared as a tenor soloist in recitals, opera, and oratorio. He's also in the voice and early music faculty at the Longy School of Music of Bard College, and he was director of choral activities at Phillips Exeter Academy from 2006 to 2012. He was raised in El Paso, Texas, and he holds degrees from Southern Methodist University in Dallas and also the Boston Conservatory. I'm so thrilled to have you here, Ryan. Welcome, and thank you so much for visiting the morning show.
Thank you, Mary. It's good to be here.
It's great to have you here. Full disclosure now, I am a member of the Newburyport Choral Society.
That's right.
And I'm sure that you know that we were all thrilled when you accepted the job. So, Ryan, to start with, I'm always interested in finding out how people find their pathways in life. And yours has been devoted to classical music, both vocal performance as well as conducting. So, Ryan, how did you figure out that you wanted a career in music, and in particular in the realm of classical music?
Well, I can't say I came to this through a traditional path. I didn't come from a family of classical musicians, although I will say apparently I have a great uncle or something like that was the violinist with the St. Paul Symphony, who passed down his violin to me. So I started violin lessons at a young age on this beautiful Justin Stainer violin, but there was an amazing classical instrument that I played bluegrass fiddle on.
Oh, wonderful.
So I started. I was really into more popular music and country music and bluegrass, etc., and played in a bluegrass band and played with a country music band. And so all my music was mostly popular music as a kid until I got involved in the church choir and then the El Paso Children's Chorus. And I think the sort of turning point that brought me over to the classical side of things is that my mother had a very close friend who was pursuing her doctorate in voice at the University of Texas, El Paso. And her dissertation was on the male changing voice, and I was the dissertation subject.
Oh,
so
my
I
gosh.
essentially was tracked over 3 years and got free lessons, and it was this whole thing to track how the change of the male voice, how it happened. And through that process, I learned a lot of classical music, and then I started playing in orchestras, etc. So I never knew exactly for a long time, I thought I wanted to just sing. Thought I wanted to do musical theater. I thought I wanted to sing opera. Then I was interested in early music, and I suddenly found myself in front of the group, instead of watching the conductor, and one thing led to another.
Well, it was serendipitous then, both that you got the violin, because it sounds like that was a helpful nudge, and also that dissertation also was a serendipitous event that sort of also amplified the nudge. So
exactly.
You mentioned finding yourself with the baton in hand, and one of the things that I wanted to ask you was what you have discovered that you enjoy about having that baton in hand. George Case, your predecessor at the Choral Society, used to say, presumably in jest, but perhaps not entirely, that choral conducting was an exercise in total power. So anyway, you laugh. Maybe that's part of it. What do you enjoy about choral conducting, Ryan?
Well, I think, so I had to go back to my experience as a performer. And when I was singing in choirs and as a soloist, etc., I found myself more interested in what the conductor was doing than in what I was supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
And I also, as I started to as a soloist, have sort of more what I would say high profile gigs, I found myself to become, my level of nervous energy was getting a little out of control, I would say. It became at times debilitating, my own performance anxiety. And I found that when I was conducting, it was no longer about me. It was about everybody else. The job was to enable the best in everybody,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to the spotlight just being on myself and that sort of, it really, when you're a soloist sitting at the front of the stage of an orchestra, it's about you in that moment.
Everyone's
Um,
eyes are on, and everyone's ears are on you.
exactly.
So,
And so when your back is to the audience, the people that are watching you are busy, number one.
and they're watching your back.
um,
Yeah.
but it's the idea that your job is to enable the best from everybody. And it's always the case, I think, especially in a community chorus where the sum is so much greater than the individual parts.
Mm. Yeah.
And I also found as a conductor um, that there's more to conducting than just the music.
Mm.
It's about being a communicator and an educator and sharing everything about the music. That as a soloist, it really is this sort of insulated event that's just about you at times. So being a conductor enabled me, I felt, to, this is going to almost sound preachy, but there was more almost like evangelizing that happens where you're able to
Interesting.
share in a way that you can't as a soloist.
Yeah, that's interesting. One of the things I wanted to ask you about, and you've started responding to it already, was how you see your particular approach to choral conducting. What you want choral members to experience with and learn
Mm.
from you or with you, and with what kind of results for an audience.
Well, one of the things about choral singing, as opposed to orchestral playing, is that your body, you are the instrument, which of course means everything that's happened to you during the day affects your voice. You don't take your instrument and put it in a case and put it in a climate controlled environment.
Right.
And that's the beauty of it, though, that when we sing, we're expressing all our vulnerability
Mm-hmm.
and all the challenges of life. In a way, it's an outlet. And the power of getting, in our case at Newburyport, 120, 130 people all on the same page after, I think about, we obviously haven't had a rehearsal and who knows when we'll have one with all of us together, but
Right.
just the concept of, on a Tuesday evening, after a long day, everybody coming from so many different work environments, home environments, family environments, coming together with one sole purpose and able to channel that, to me, is one of the most profound and moving things about choral singing.
Yeah.
And that you are the instrument doing it.
Yeah.
So as a choral conductor, one of the things that I always find is it's a challenge, but it comes with great reward, is how do you focus all those energies, all those different backgrounds, everything that's happened in everybody's life, and the varying range of experience. There's so many variables, and here comes my daughter behind me. I hope it's okay. She's going to
Yes,
say
of
hi.
course. Hello. Hi.
This is my 5-year-old Caroline.
Hi, nice to meet you, Caroline. Hi.
So I got off track with her.
You were talking about channeling all those different experiences that everybody brings to the Tuesday night rehearsal and kind of bringing them together. And yeah, I mean, before going to a rehearsal, I always go, oh my God, it's nighttime, I'm sleepy. But going to the rehearsal and experiencing the rehearsal, it galvanizes me, and I lose the tiredness and have a different kind of experience. So I understand what you're saying.
That's a great verb to say, galvanize. I like that. And there's something, you asked about my approach. And the other thing I was going to say is that there are so many parts of being a singer and of being a conductor, and my hope is that in a rehearsal, somebody leaves there having learned a little bit about vocal pedagogy, having learned some musical skills that maybe they didn't know, having to learn to listen better, which is probably the number one thing in choral singing that one has to do is listen. I always had a conducting teacher that said if there was a little less singing and a little more listening, there'd be a lot more music.
Well put.
And there's of course, there's just the camaraderie that comes with that many people being together.
Yeah. Well, Well, Ryan, I wanted to ask you about your experience with Emmanuel music because it's a significant part of your musical life. And I didn't know much. I knew Emmanuel music was very highly regarded. I don't know that much about it. And so I was hoping that you could talk to us a little about Emmanuel music and your relationship with the late Craig
Mm-hmm.
Smith, who was their, I think, founding director and whom you
Yes,
succeeded. And they have a particular focus on Bach cantatas and masterworks. So could you help us understand a bit about how Emmanuel music has been formative for you?
of course. Emmanuel Music, just a quick, brief history, was formed in 1970 by Craig Smith, who at the time was a young organist, choir director. Oh, do you need to wait?
I'm sorry, go ahead, Ryan. I had a technical
Oh,
thing I had to take care of.
no,
Please go
no
ahead.
worries at all. So Craig Smith in 1970 was a young student at the New England Conservatory who was asked to be the music director and organist at this Anglican church on 15 Newbury Street in Boston. And he had a real affinity for Bach and thought, let's try a Bach cantata. And it started out as some of his friends volunteering, and it caught on, and the congregation and the musicians loved it. And we flash forward, to 1985, and they became a nonprofit that was the ensemble in residence at Emmanuel Church, devoted for doing, mostly known for doing Bach cantatas from September through May as part of the worship service with professional musicians, a different Bach cantata every Sunday. They also then sort of spread their wings a bit to do other evening concerts, opera performances. Did some tours. I came on board in 1997. I was just out of graduate school from the Boston Conservatory and started there as a singer, and actually was one of the tenor soloists and members of the chorus. So I got to work under Craig Smith from 1997 until his passing in 2007. He at one point invited me to do some guest conducting there, and then after his passing, there was some interim uh, leadership that then led to a full search, and I was in 2010 appointed the new artistic director of Emmanuel Music. So our sort of focus and mission is mostly on the music of Bach and his circle of influence. And as I said, every September through May, on every Sunday, we do a different Bach cantata with professional soloists, orchestra, and chorus. The other thing is we have an evening concert series that some of it is, some modern works of Harbison, works of Stravinsky. We've done Mozart. There's a chamber music series. Anyways, I've been there for 10 years, and it really has been my musical home since 1997. And I feel like I might have lost Mary. Are you still there, Mary? I guess she's still having technical difficulties, and I'm not sure if I'm still on. So I guess I'll keep talking about Emmanuel. I'll tell you one of the things as a conductor that has been very formative in my work at Emmanuel is what I see is, we call it the ensemble approach. The chorus, the orchestra are all a sort of ensemble of soloists, as opposed to the sort of top-down method one thinks of as a conductor. It's an incredibly collaborative environment, and the collective experience of those musicians is such that it far exceeds my own. And I draw on the experience, the knowledge, the musicianship of my colleagues. And so it's a much more, as I say, collaborative process than one might think of the sort of maestro conductor paradigm we're used to from the top down. Is Mary back yet? Not sure if we're live or not, or what's happening here. What I will do is I have here some questions that I know. Oh, hi. And Brian is here. You're muted, Brian.
Yep. Hi, good morning. I'm Brian Greenberg. I'm the media director for the Newburyport Choral Society. And so until Mary comes back, I guess the next question would be, how, we have an upcoming fall semester, and maybe you could just begin to talk about how you're visioning that, Ryan, and I'll pop off and hopefully let Mary come back on, and we'll assume we're still recording.
That sounds great. Thanks, Brian, for jumping in here. I hope Mary is okay. Yeah, so this fall, it's a unique time, of course, with the pandemic, and we've learned that singers are the biggest culprits, or they call super spreaders, because of essentially the force with which the air leaves singers' mouth, and this aerosolization. So now they're saying that the safest distance for singers to be is 20 feet away from each other, which, as one can imagine, leads to numerous logistical and space challenges, if not just complete impediments to getting together. You couple that with many at-risk demographics, and so we will not be doing any singing as a group in person until we know it is safe. So in the meantime, we're going to go to a sort of virtual online semester. I'm actually quite excited about this, because one of the things that so often as a new conductor coming into the role as a music director is you're faced with the challenge of immediately putting together a fall program. And in that situation, you don't have the time to get to know the members as well. You're not able to sort of lay the groundwork for some choral foundations, and you're not always able to dig into the music in a way you would otherwise want to. So this fall, what I put together is a 10-week session that allows us to explore those areas. We're going to do some work on vocal pedagogy. We're going to talk about basic choral skills. I'm going to have some guests come in to talk about ideas of diversity, equity, and inclusion in choral music. There's going to be a composers forum. We will have a speech pathologist come speak to us about vocal health. And we're going to have a master class actually with some of our Emmanuel music singers. So I'm actually quite excited about what the possibilities could be in this new virtual world of making choral music, and knowing that this will only make the group stronger moving into the spring, when hopefully we can get together again and have a concert and rehearse together.
I'm trying to work behind the scenes and seeing, what the technical situation is. So maybe you could just talk about some of the, have you mentioned about the spring concert?
I have not. I can tell you.
Spring of 2021. Yeah, I think that would be interesting, because part of the rehearsing, as I understand it, is going to be actually rehearsing some of the key pieces about that concert, and I think it would be interesting to hear more about that.
Yes. So in the hopes that we can be together again in the spring and have a concert, I put together a concert that I'm calling The Promise of Living, Remembrance and Renewal. I feel that as a community, it will be important for us in the spring to mourn the extensive loss that this pandemic, both the health pandemic and what I would call the social pandemic, has created for us. So I'm starting the concert with a requiem by Gabriel Fauré, a 19th century French composer. And this is not a typical requiem in that it doesn't have any of the sort of fire and brimstone dies irae text, but it's really a requiem, a mass for peace and remembrance. And then that would be the first half. The second half is one of my absolute favorite choral pieces by English composer Ralph Vaughan Williams. It's called Toward the Unknown Region, and it has text by Walt Whitman, who of course we know is an American poet who is actually a nurse in the Civil War, right on the front line. So here we have somebody who experienced loss firsthand and is writing this text that has this incredible optimism and search for something new. And the program then will end with a piece by American composer Aaron Copland called The Promise of Living, which is, it comes from his opera, The Tender Land. Now, sprinkled in between these two pieces, we will have some other works by contemporary composers, is my hope, and also some works by composers that are representing a population that has otherwise been marginalized or forgotten. Specifically, a piece by Undine Smith Moore, who is a African-American female composer from the late 1800s, early 1900s, who wrote some incredible music. And one of my own personal initiatives is to help be active in these ideas of diversity, equity, inclusion, so that we have the opportunity to explore works of composers that we have been, as I say, marginalized or forgotten over time. And Mary's back. Hi.
Hi, I'm so sorry about that. My computer glitch was glitchier than I anticipated, so I just lost power temporarily. But thank you, Brian. No. It looks like you did a wonderful and beautiful job of keeping it going. I appreciate it. Why don't you just stay on screen, Brian? You're the hero of the hour. And it sounds as though you had gotten to the question I had posed about your diversity initiative, Brian. It sounds as though that's what you were talking about. No,
I'm not sure we got to that part yet. We were talking about the fall semester.
Oh, wonderful!
And then a little bit about the spring concert, and we just worked through that. So
great. Well, one of the things that I had wanted to talk to you about, Ryan, was in our Zoom meetings. And thank you very much for those. I don't know, had you talked about the Zoom meetings at all?
We had not gotten to that yet.
Because one of the great things that Ryan did was have small groups on Zoom of choral members meet to get to know him, and we really appreciated it. It was great to get to know you and to actually get to know one another better. But you talked about wanting to launch a diversity initiative of composers who are perhaps not customarily part of the choral canon, women composers, composers of color. And I wanted to talk to you about what have some of the barriers been to having diversity of composers included, and what makes this particularly important to you?
Well, one of the things that I've been trying desperately during this pandemic to be glass half full as opposed to half empty. And, admittedly, some days are better than others. But one of the sort of benefits of this is that there's been a lot more time to think and to work on that sort of back of the mind to-do list that one always has rolling, but the pressures of daily life get in the way.
Absolutely.
And I've often thought that the classical music world is too homogenous. And there are many reasons why. And we can go way back to, elementary school education, and are there classical music programs in the schools? And there's only so much we can do as classical musicians, but especially I would say in the greater Boston area, the classical music world is a very white, privileged world of access.
Yeah.
And so along with some of my colleagues actually at Emmanuel Music, we started thinking about in an ideal world, what do we want classical music to look like in 10 years, in 2030? And how do you work back from that? The whole Black Lives Matter movement and these ideas that I have felt that it's important for arts organizations to be active in this, but active not in a way that is a token or that is a Band-Aid, but that one sees real results. And those real results take time. It's not something that you can just send out a statement,
right,
and then you wash your hands and you're done with it and life goes back to normal. So my thinking was, how do we change things? We have to start from what do we want it to look like and then work backwards. And my hope, which is I'm sure quite grand and maybe not realistic, but is that the performers, the audience members, the staff, the administration, and the programming is transformed and looks more like, represents more of what our communities look like. And so, as it relates to Newburyport, one of the things I kind of mentioned it when you were off air was that I'm having a gentleman, Reginald Mobley, who's a African-American countertenor, a good friend of mine, come talk to us about ideas of diversity, equity, and inclusion and access. And especially as it relates to choral singing and how, so for so long, I think white choirs love doing spirituals. And I do it myself. I love singing that music. I love conducting it. And it's often the token piece at the end of a concert. And I think it's important for us all to know that the spirituals so often were arranged for the entertainment of white audiences. That these were not pieces. That's not what they sounded like when they were original songs learned by rote. And how do we not appropriate but be appropriate in our rendering of these pieces? And so I have this colleague of mine who's going to come talk to us about that. And this is a huge learning for me as well, which I'm excited to dig deeper in this. Also, how do we make sure that our programming reflects the communities in which we live, and how does our programming challenge the communities in which we live? I really feel there's a obligation, and it's a joyful obligation as arts organizations to broaden our horizons, not only of our members, but of our audiences. So I'm hopeful that we can start looking at more of the works of female composers, of composers of color, and not only those contemporary ones, but ones that have been forgotten. There's this wonderful African-American female composer, Marguerite Bonds, who was writing these essentially cantatas inspired by her study of Bach, and nobody really knew about her. I mean, I'd like to dig deeper and find how, and my hope is that when our programming, that's the thing we can do right now. We can immediately change our programming. And maybe in changing our programming, and also when we bring in guest artists, we can be cognizant of bringing in always the highest quality artists, but also those that are more reflective of the diversity of the community.
Yeah. That sounds very exciting, Ryan. I can't wait. That sounds just wonderful. Totally.
Thank you.
Well, we've reached the end of our time now. And one final question, though, is if somebody wants to join the chorus this fall, even though there won't be any live rehearsals, can they still join? And if so, how?
Most definitely. In fact, I hope that the fall is an opportunity, in a way, for us to expand our membership and bring in new folks that maybe aren't even in this area in the fall, but might be later on. But if you go to our website, I think within the next couple of days there will be a link up about how to join. It's Tuesday evenings starting September 8th.
Wonderful. And that the URL for the Newburyport Choral Society is very simple and straightforward. It's www.newburyportchoralsociety.org. So go ahead and look it up, and it is a very welcoming community. I would add that. So Ryan, thank you so much. I apologize for the technical glitch, but it's been wonderful to talk to you. And there were other things I want to talk to you about. Maybe you'll just have to come back.
There you go. Sounds good.
So thank you so much. Thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you'll join us next Thursday on the morning show, when I'll be pleased to welcome Marla Andrews. She's a humane educator at Unity Farm Sanctuary in Sherburne, Massachusetts, and she'll be talking to us about the rescue work they do there that enables these magnificent animals to live out their lives in health and peace. She'll talk about the wisdom of these animals, what they have to share to us, and some of the research that's been done to demonstrate the emotional and cognitive abilities of farm animals that may surprise you and that may make you shift your view of them as sentient fellow beings rather than ingredients. So I hope you join us next Thursday at 9 a.m. on the morning show. And if you missed part of today's show, it will be available for viewing on Port Media's YouTube channel playlist for the morning show at www.ncmhub.org. Just click on the YouTube icon. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you back here next week. Bye now.